right into it. The first prompt is chocolate cake, a dark book you absolutely love. And for this prompt I chose, this is a Czech copy, Human Acts by Han Kang. I absolutely love her writing. This is a book about the Gwangju massacre that happened in the 80s. Yes, in the 80s. 1980. And during that time, that happened in the 80s in South Korea. And during that time, South Korea was pretty much a dictatorship. It definitely wasn't democratic like it is today. And there were some protesters in the Gwangju city, and at the time there was this military regime that was very, very violent towards the citizens. And I feel like I'm not selling you this book properly, but basically each chapter is from a different POV, and the first chapter is written in a second person form, which means it says you are doing this, you were there, and we learn about this character later on. It's not like a ambiguous character, and it's referenced multiple times because each POV is somehow linked to the first character in a way, and each chapter has a completely different format, which is also very interesting. And like, for example, one chapter later on is from a protester who was caught and tortured in prison, and 10 years later he's giving an interview to this, what I assume is a university professor doing research, and he is talking to the professor. You never actually get to know the professor doesn't talk there, but you can kind of tell what the professor wants to know, and sometimes he's like, how can you even ask me this question? And it's so tragic and sad, but very well written. And this is the first book that I've read by her, and I absolutely loved it, and I want to read more of her books that were translated to either Czech or English. And just go and read it. Be prepared for a lot of violence, naturally. But I love this book. It has a very dark theme, but I loved it. And you should pick it up too. And by the way, in the Czech edition, the title that can be translated is Where the Grass Blooms. They've actually taken a title of a chapter and they switched it, because in Korean the title can be translated as The Boy is Coming, but they switched the title, and to be fair, I really like this title, Where the Grass Blooms, but in English it's called Human Acts for some reason. So yeah. And I think here it is that the Gwangju city is like a less famous Tiananmen Square in China, if you have heard about it. Guys, I have to pause like every 5 seconds because of the sounds. Gosh. Okay, next question, a light read. And for this prompt I chose The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. I have again the Czech copy. I've read it years ago when I wasn't even reading in English, and I don't remember much of it other than I loved it. It's a magical realism book about a circus that mysteriously appears, and you follow these two characters that are inside the circus, and they're in this competition with each other, and they fall in love. It's a magic competition. I don't remember much from it, but 11. Yeah, I mean, I've read it roughly 5 or 6 years ago, so it's been a while. Okay, next prompt. Red Velvet, a book that gave you mixed emotions. And for this prompt, I don't have the physical copy of the book, but it's The Unbearable Lightness of Being by Milan Kundera, who is a Czech writer. And I've read this book as a part of a reading challenge, and I loved it and I hated it at the same time, because the book has some very interesting ideas. It's fairly philosophical, it's very melancholic at the same time, and the main theme is that how you should live your life. Should you live it with burdens of keeping relationships around you, or should you live a light life where you kind of betray everyone and isolate yourself? And it's a very, very interesting book. That being said, the majority of the book is just about infidelity. And by the way, it takes place in Czechoslovakia in the 1960s, after the Russian army came to occupy it. It's like history always repeats itself, right? But at the time was pretty non-violent, and you're dealing with the occupation, but this is definitely not the center of the story. It's almost there just as a background, which also wasn't democratic at the time, by the way. Obviously, I don't probably have to really explain that, but we follow 4 main characters. The 2 main characters, I would say, that are there the most are a married couple where the husband constantly cheats on his wife, and you have a lot of descriptions of the cheating that I absolutely hated. And then the 3rd character is one of many mistresses of the husband that I just talked about, and the 4th character is a boyfriend of the mistress that she met later on in life that is also cheating on his wife. And I actually like the 4th character the most out of all, but still, like, I hated the cheating, and like the cheating takes so much of the book, and I liked it, but I really hated it at the same time. Next prompt, Cheesecake, a book you would recommend to anyone. And I thought about this a lot, and I thought, okay, should I choose a classic? Should I choose a non-fiction? Because I know that sci-fi and fantasy, magical realism is not for everyone, and I totally understand. So a book that I would recommend to anyone is 1984 by George Orwell. This book was ahead of its time, I'm telling you. I didn't read it in high school. I read it after I graduated high school, and I'm glad I did, because I feel like I could understand it better than if I just read it in high school. And you probably have heard of this story. This is the book where the famous Big Brother came from, I think. And one of you guys asked me for a review of this book, but I can't remember much from it. I remember the main themes of the book, but I don't exactly remember the plot, because it's been such a long time since I've read it. I've read it like 5 or 6 years ago, and it's great. I remember like the double speak and the Ministry of Truth, I think, and I remember the ending as well. And this is a dystopian book. You probably know what it's about, right? I don't have to explain it to you, but it's a dystopian book in a fictional country that could also not be really fictional. society. They're very much controlling the population, just trying to actively erase certain events, changing the language. And I know that this book has been banned in a couple of countries, and it's like those countries are literally snitching on themselves with that, you know. And I would say that now it is a classic, right? It's considered a classic. It will definitely be a classic in the future. I could totally see kids like 200, 300 years from now reading this, if we would still live in a democratic society, which who knows what is gonna happen, right? And I like it. It's actually one of my favorites, and I feel like this book inspired so many writers of the dystopian genre, or even maybe in the sci-fi genre, but mainly dystopian. And again, I'm not selling you this book properly. Just go and read it and thank me later if you haven't read it already. Okay. Then we've got Coffee Cake, a book you started but never finished. And for this I chose a book by Sally Rooney, Beautiful World, Where Are You? Now, I'm one of those people that never DNF books. I have a special shelf in my Goodreads account titled Will Continue Later. So it's WCL, not DNF, which is did not finish, but WCL, Will Continue Later, which is when I'm starting a book and I really like it and I just don't feel like it's the right time for me to be reading it. So I put it down for now and I save it on that shelf and I will continue later. There are only few books that I've put down knowing that I will not be picking up again, and Beautiful World, Where Are You is one of them. And that's because the characters in that book made the stupidest choices possible when I just thought, why would you do this? And it only made me angry. I put it down and I will not continue it. If I would ever start a book by her again, it would be a different book. And I know that she's known for writing these real relationships, but I just can't read about toxic relationships in books. I can't. It's making me angry. Maybe I can read about them in like fantasy when it's not the main plot, but in just regular fiction, I can't. And I know that a lot of romance books are problematic as well, because they try to make it interesting and it turns into toxic, but the people end up together at the end anyway, and that's also making me angry, so that's why I don't read a lot of romance genre. Next prompt, A Carrot Cake, a book with great writing, and for this I chose Hangang again, the Human Axe, or I would have to choose the Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern that I also talked about, or I would choose any book by Brandon Sanderson. I love his writing. This is The Way of Kings Part 1. I finished this book, by the way, already, and I just love his writing, and all of these writing styles are totally different, but I love them. So those are my answers. Next prompt, Tiramisu, a book that left you wanting more. And I immediately thought of Gallant by V.E. Schwab. This is a magical realism slash fantasy. I would say it's probably fantasy, about a orphaned girl that suddenly gets this letter saying that she in fact has a family and she should go to Gallant, but the twist is her mother left a diary, and the finishing line is, "You always will be safe," or something like that, if you will stay away from Gallant. But she doesn't care. She goes to Gallant anyway, which is this beautiful house, or more like a residence. I imagined it as was like an old English residence, and stuff happens. And this book left me wanting more. I finished the audiobook in 2 days, which is unheard of me. I just couldn't stop listening, and I wanted to know more. And I know that a lot of people didn't like this book. I loved it. Just the vibes, the atmosphere. The atmosphere was very much gothic and mysterious, and I love this book, and it's a standalone, so I know that I will not get a second book, but I just wanted to know more, really, about this world, and especially the ending is kind of unfinished, I would say, or could have been better. So, yeah. Next prompt, Cupcakes, a series with 4+ books. And for this, I gotta choose The Stormlight Archives by Brandon Sanderson. Again, this is The Way of Kings, that's the first book. And I think in total this series should have 10 books. But the first are only 5, I think. The first, what's a quintet? And then it will be set probably in the future. That's what he did with Mistborn, which I also love. The Mistborn, you have 3 books in like the first trilogy, and then you'll have 4 books, and then another 3 books in the series. He does this a lot. So I just love the Stormlight Archive series just so much. I need to make a separate video about it at some point after I'll finish reading it. And I think the last book comes out in 2023 or 2024, I'm not sure exactly. So up until that point I want to read everything that's in the series, because I only have read the book 1, so yeah. Next, Fruitcake, a book that wasn't what you anticipated. And for this I chose a book that actually pleasantly surprised me, because I like Fruitcake. I know that this prompt was probably for like a disappointment read, but I like Fruitcake, so. And for this prompt I chose The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And I love this book. I did not expect to love this book so much. It's about a celebrity that is old now, and she was one of the it girls of Hollywood's golden age, and she tells her story, and I loved it. I also listened to the audiobook in like 2 days or 3 days, because I couldn't put it down. That being said, I also chose a book that was a disappointment, and that was The Chalk Man by C.G. Tudor. This is a book about a group of kids that are finding these chalk paintings, and it leads them to a dead body, and just the ending was super unsatisfying. The mystery gets kind of solved, kind of unsolved, and I liked the book when I was reading it, but it was such a huge disappointment at the end, and it was just not what I expected. I expected this incredible mystery, and that was just not what I got, really. I don't want to give up on her just yet. I have 1 more book by her, so I'll try to read it, but The Chalk Man was just not it, in my personal opinion. It was actually one of my worst books of 2021, so really didn't enjoy it.